The recording studio that is the subject of this film is not only capable of recording, mixing and mastering any kind of musical genre to the highest standards. It can also create high-quality film soundtracks without having to use outside composers, session musicians, or even an entire symphony orchestra, as it has all these in its own arsenal. MARINSOUND Studio is one of the best partners for your future. But first, a little history. Sound is as much a part of our reality as air is, for example, and we take it just as much for granted. So if sound disappeared, it would be like the air disappearing. Humanity's greatest achievement is cinema, which in due course also needed sound. At that time, the entire recording industry was trying everything possible to create sound that was comparable to natural sound. But even with the huge numbers of valves being used, it was impossible to prevent a certain amount of distortion. With the introduction of digital technology, things got even worse, as the new sound was called lifeless and uninteresting. Even though it was easier, and most importantly cheaper, to work with media sound, the quality known as musical character was completely lost. Although the latest advances in sound conversion have addressed these problems to some extent. It was extremely unfortunate that media sound, with its limitless libraries of samples, took over all shows and almost all of the film world. Everything began to sound mass-produced and characterless. At the same time, performers were no longer required to be able to play a musical instrument well, or to have a voice, or an ear for music, or a feel for rhythm, and so on and so on. Absolutely everything could be moved or tuned. On one hand, music became accessible to all, but on the other hand, the unique mystery that is called talent and individuality was lost. And this is the reason why only a small number of people today are returning to using analog recording for live music, as it is an extremely complicated process requiring the highest levels of mastery and professionalism, both in performance and in mixing. An example of this level of professionalism is James Labrie, vocalist of the legendary Dream Theater, who chose the MARINSOUND Studio in the Russian city of Krasnodar as the place to record one of his projects, because the equipment and software here are world-class.
Mr. Marin, and I can't thank him enough.
Mr. Labrie.
Yeah, he's made this all possible, and it will be amazing when done.
In creating high-quality live sound, especially film soundtracks, absolutely everything is important from the very beginning. The MARINSOUND Recording Studio provides everything necessary to make a sensational recording of any musical instrument, even a symphony orchestra, and achieve warm, high-quality sound. This quality is obtained thanks to the recommendations of Philip Newells, an internationally renowned expert in studio construction. The equipment at the studio meets the highest standards in existence anywhere in the world today. The heart and the pride of the studio is the Neve VR Legend series analog console, which includes the flying faders and total recall options. After the studio itself and professional sound engineers and technicians, obviously above all you need a composer, an arranger and of course professional musicians. And, fortunately, this studio has them all, of the highest level, from rock and pop music to jazz and classical music. There is no need to bring any high-class session musicians from another town or country. Everything is here, including the instruments.
What
The technical capabilities for mastering at MARINSOUND also meet the most exacting requirements. Apart from the equipment in the studio, we also have the most powerful open-air turbo sound aspect equipment, at least in Russia, with a total capacity of more than 1/3 of a megawatt and the best amplifier in the world, the MC², and XTA crossover systems and a full backline. On the road again, that's the way to go. American producer and sound engineer Eric Schilling works in Florida in his own studio in Orlando and in the Hit Factory studio in Miami. A joint project brought this winner of 15 Grammys to faraway Krasnodar, which is now not so far away at all. As it turned out, his opinions about working with sound matched the opinions of his Russian counterparts in many ways.
I was impressed because I saw that when we needed to change the drum sound, they did the same thing that I would do at home. They went out and they worked on the drum kit. We changed heads, we fixed the snare because that's the right approach.
An assessment of the technical and professional level of the MARINSOUND studio given by an outsider will be a great deal more objective.
The studio is world class. It really, sincerely is. I've been in many studios, and this is an exceptional studio. The staff here, Mr. Marin, has been very gracious, and it's all been done top class. It's excellent. So the technical level and the qualifications of the specialists mean MARINSOUND Studio can do work with sound not only of any level of difficulty, but if necessary, to very short deadlines. The studio is ready to do recording, mixing and mastering in any musical genre or style. However, the main field the studio is working in at the present time is film soundtracks. There is no need to hire an orchestra or musicians from another town or country for this, as this cultural centre of the south of Russia has musicians of the highest calibre. Our symphony orchestra is made up of the best musicians selected from 4 large ensembles. The studio also has its own composer and arranger who both have extensive experience in their fields and can bring any idea or project to life, however daring. Our portfolio includes such works as the full soundtrack for the film The Somnambulist for Deborah Burke Films in New Orleans, the soundtrack for the film Brigada 2 Naslednik, and a range of others. We are always ready to consider new projects and would be delighted to see you as one of our partners.